Good morning, iPhone development team. I am excited to hear on the development of the 14 Pro Max. We found a way to make the camera bump even bigger, and now the notch is gone. There's a giant hole in the top of the screen, but who cares? The notch is huge, the bump is huge, the screen is huge. Everything about this phone is amazing. That sounds fantastic. Feel free to raise your prices. And how about the development on the 14 Pro? We made our camera bump bigger too. In fact, MagSafe doesn't even work anymore, but our photos look incredible. That's fantastic. And how about the upcoming new size, the iPhone 14 Max? Yeah, we are under $1,000, but we kept the notch for people who like it. And yeah, it's 60 hertz, but most people aren't gonna care. So I think our model is gonna be the best seller. That's awesome. We're so proud of our iPhone 14 Max division. And how about our entry-level iPhone 14? How is development going? Those other guys, they had so much work to do. I wasn't sure if you wanted the 6.1-inch iPhone to get an update. Well, yes, of course. Someone has to sit at the $800 starting price. What did you come up with? Well, it was kind of a tough year, you know. I had a lot of things to do, and I kind of got distracted a few times. You did design a new iPhone, though, right? It's very, very similar to, you know, the iPhone 13 sold so well, we figured why change it. Yeah, it did sell well, but, you know, we kind of want to have justification for prices going up, and we'd love to see what you worked on over the past year. I don't know how to tell you this, Mr. Tim. I know we're thinking about downsizing and everything, and I please ask that you don't downsize me, but everything's the same. Literally everything. Oh, good gravy. Oh boy. Okay, well, can we at least see how much faster the A16 chip is in your model? There's an A16 chip? Were we supposed to adopt that in our... Oh, no. Wait a minute. You're telling me you're using the same display, the same chassis. You're using the same port as before, and it's the same camera, and it's the same processor, too? Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Wow.
We're really gonna have to come up with some creative color options, otherwise people are not going to know the difference. I'll get right on that. You know, we didn't do a yellow last year, so we could work on a solid beige yellow color. Oh goodness, it's a good thing he's my nephew, otherwise I'd have to fire that guy. But without further ado, let's begin. Thinking back at all of the minor upgrades we've had over the years, I'm starting to think the regular 6.1-inch iPhone 14 might be one of, if not the most boring, minor, incremental, year-over-year upgrade that the iPhone has ever seen. Now, there's a lot of top contenders we have to compare it to. Granted, yes, it's not out yet, so hopefully Apple has some surprises for us, but so far, some close runner-ups in regards to most minor iPhone upgrades has to be the iPhone 4S, the iPhone 6S, and the iPhone XS. Of course, the S years naturally are more incremental and minor because they typically don't require any type of design upgrade, and it's usually meant to be more about performance. But back when the iPhone 4S launched, they were kind of boasting about the new color options a lot more with the white, and they did finally allow for 1080p video recording with the first ever video stabilization in the iPhone, which was a pretty big deal. And depending on how you view this feature, the 4S introduced Siri. For the first time, we had kind of a more intelligent digital assistant shipping with the iPhone. So if you use that pretty regularly, I could see a lot of you assuming the 4S was still a pretty major year, despite the fact from the outside there was almost no noticeable differences between the 4 and the 4S. It was really hard to tell which iPhone you were using, but Apple quickly realized they wanted to come up with ways for you to realize when you had the newest iPhone from the outside. That way you could flex on all of your poor friends like a jerk. So as time went on, they realized that adding more color options during the S year was a really good way to do that. So the iPhone 6 to 6S, depending on how you look at these features, may be seen as a pretty minor year. I mean, yes, the 4S got CPU upgrades. We're pretty much used to all iPhones getting CPU upgrades until now, but the 6S got beefed up aluminum to help combat bendgate. It got the first 4K camera in an iPhone, which was a pretty big deal at the time. It had the A9 chip, which was was a pretty substantial upgrade over the A8 chip, and it got the addition of 3D Touch, which at the time, back in 2015 when it came out, 3D Touch felt like a pretty big deal, like it was gonna fundamentally change the way we used our phones. Looking back at it now, 3D Touch might not feel like that major of an upgrade. We also got the new rose gold color option, which stood out quite a bit, so while it may have looked minor on the outside, you know, there were no new screen changes or anything, and a lot of the colors did not change at all, it still is an important milestone in Apple's history, considering that was the last flagship iPhone that still had the headphone jack, but it's not even getting software support anymore. But a really close contender to most boring year-over-year upgrade to me has to be the iPhone 10 to the 10s, but maybe we're being a little bit too hard on the 2018 iPhone because that 10s launched in September of 2018, whereas the iPhone 10 launched in November of 2017, which means that there wasn't even a full year between those two iPhones launching, so you could partially blame the hardware team being limited on time as to why the upgrade wasn't too major. And yeah, the iPhone 10R and the 10s Max that year obviously stole the show, and that's why it still felt like a pretty major year in iPhone history, because there was now a Face ID equipped affordable iPhone plus the biggest display ever in an iPhone. But as far as that 5.8-inch upgrade, still felt pretty minor. We just got the gold color option and like a little bit better battery life just by like an hour or so, and the A12 chip did get a much better neural engine, and while it wasn't super fast over the A11 chip, it was a decent improvement. The cameras got some enhancements with Beauty Gate, if you can remember that, thanks to Smart HDR. They also got stereo audio recording on the 10s, but overall, all of those little changes year over year definitely don't feel like much, especially considering it was a $1,000 iPhone, and that was still a pretty new concept for a lot of people. Like, you're charging that much for a phone, and year over year there were still changes that minor. It's pretty dang incremental. But how does that compare to what's rumored with the upcoming iPhone 14? Again, just referring to that entry-level option, it's rumored to get a beefed-up front-facing camera, which, to be fair, the iPhone 10s also had similar front-facing camera improvements, with 1080p 60 frames a second now showing on both lenses. But there's a lot of similarities between the regular iPhone 13 and iPhone 14. Same exact display, same chassis, same port, still rocking Face ID on both. There's not going to be any notch changes, and there's been some chit-chat about the lenses on the back being improved because there's dummy models with camera units that are slightly larger than the iPhone 13, so people are thinking the main sensor on the 13 Pro is coming to the base model iPhone 14, and it's a good sensor, don't get me wrong, but it's one of those very marginal improvements that only techies are probably going to notice. Like, yes, the aperture is lower, so it performs a bit better in low light, and the ultra-wide camera will probably support macro mode, so that's an improvement over the iPhone 13, but as far as battery life improvements, there's not rumored to be much there. And the big change this year that I'm fairly convinced is going to happen, because it totally sounds like Apple, is they're not going to give the A16 chip to the regular iPhone 14s. And I don't think this has everything to do with the chip shortage and cutting costs where they can. I think it has more to do with giving the Pros more selling points, because as years go on and you start to bring more Pro features to the cheaper iPhones, there's going to be less of a justification for people to spend that kind of money on a Pro iPhone, especially this year when the iPhone 14 Max is entering the picture, and now you're going to have a 6.7-inch iPhone with a big battery that's under $1,000. I think a lot of people are going to be tempted to go with that now over the iPhone 14 Pro Max. So Apple is intentionally trying to say, well, hold on, if you do go with the cheaper one, you may get the worst performing processor, because a 16 chip is just going to be on the Pros. In fact, Ming-Chi Kuo says that's going to be the standard moving forward. That's not a temporary thing. But at the same time, it is still rumored to be a better version of the A15 chip. Like, they want to give the entry-level iPhone 14 the one with the 5-core GPU and 6 gigabytes of RAM instead of what the iPhone 13 has, which is a 4-core GPU and 4 gigabytes of RAM. So a CPU upgrade at the end of the day, but it's not really branded as one. And just having so many dang similarities with the iPhone 13, still a 60 hertz panel and still with Face ID, still with the same okay battery life, still the same storage starting. I'm sure there will be new color options because Apple's marketing team is second to none, and they're great at making old products look new. That's what makes me think this year-over-year upgrade may be the most minor yet. It just kind of comes down to what you consider more minor. Like, is it the front-facing camera getting autofocus, or the rear-facing camera getting slightly better depth of field, or is it like video recording frame rates like the 10s had had and marginal chip upgrades like from the A11 to the A12 chip. It's gonna come down to what you think is important or not. I could absolutely see a ton of you thinking that the iPhone 14 is one of the most minor, like barely upgraded iPhones ever, now that they're kind of recycling a lot of the same silicon. But I'm curious if you guys think there was a smaller upgrade in the past, but even if you're disappointed by this news or you think Apple is giving up, I don't think it's Apple trying any less hard. I think it's just supply chains and chip shortages impacting them, but also quickly running out of major upgrades to give to the iPhone. In fact, I don't think the iPhone 14 is just this one case exception. I think moving forward, there will always be these kind of incremental minor upgrades year over year now that the display is basically being pushed to the edge as much as they can. The cameras are getting as good as they possibly can get, and the batteries are as big as they can be. There's just not going to be a ton of room for improvement. It's kind of a law of diminishing returns year over year. So if you think the iPhone 14 lineup is boring, I hate to break it to you, there's probably going to be a heck of a lot more boring for the years to come. I don't think we'll ever get an upgrade as big as the iPhone 10 was in 2017. Just so many dang changes all at once, and because of how smartphones have matured and the technology is peaking in performance and capability, it's probably going to be a lot of incremental changes in S years from here on out. Sorry to burst your bubble. I hope I'm wrong and they come up with something crazy new and exciting, but that's just the reality we live in. Feel free to let me know all of your false expectations in the comments below. This is your Apple Sheep here. I'll see you all in the next one.